If you back up to chapter 20 of Matthew, he tells another story that's another test, as it were. The first one is Jesus will reward those who seek to win his well done as a good and faithful servant as the ultimate prize. But Jesus also will reward us when we seek to be the greatest servant. Now I hope that you have. In fact, when I go around and meet with all these groups and have dinner at their homes, and we're enjoying all that, and when I meet and write in the back of my Bible people's names, I talk to the little people. And I talk to them, I say, and what are you going to be when you grow up? I just love to ask them that. And they go, a fireman, or, professional golfer, or whatever. They think deeply about it. And some of them say, I don't know. And I always pull them aside and I say, you know what? You're going to be asked that a lot. I said, do you know what the best answer to that is? Well, I don't know what I'm going to do. But one thing I'm sure of, I want to serve the Lord. The greatest thing in all of life is being useful to the Lord. Everything else is ancillary. Everything else is secondary. Everything else is less than that. The most important thing, you can be a great musician. You can be a great architect. You can be a great doctor. But the greatest thing is being useful to God. Everything else passes away. The buildings will fall apart. The people that you treat will die. The whatever trade you're in, it will diminish, but usefulness to God. And what he says, look at chapter 20, verse 20, because this is such a good story. And the mother of Zebedee's sons came to him with her sons, kneeling down, asking something from him. Isn't that typical? Parents trying to promote their kids. Verse 21, he said to her, What do you want? She said to him, grant these two sons of mine might sit on your right hand, the other on the left in your kingdom. She went for the top, didn't she? She just said, I've got the best boys in the world. We all do. Verse 22, but Jesus answered and said, you don't know what you're asking. Are you able to drink the cup that I'm about to drink, be baptized with the baptism I'm baptized with? And they said to him, we're able. Verse 23, so he said, you will indeed drink my cup and be baptized with the baptism. And then verse 24, the 10 heard it and were greatly displeased. And Jesus called them to himself, and this is the lesson. This is what he said. You know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and those who are great exercise authority over them. And a lot of people love to say how many people they have working for them. You ever heard that? Well, I have 200 men under me. I have 300 men that work for me. That is a measure of greatness. It's not God's, but it is a measure. Verse 26, yet it shall not be so among you. But whoever desires to become great among you, let him be your servant. By the way, he never says there's anything wrong with desiring to be great. Just desire to be great in a godly way. Verse 27, and whoever desires to be first among you, let him be your slave. And here's the essence. Just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life a ransom for many. The greatest thing we can do is seeking to be the greatest servant of the Lord. Remember, a servant is one who does the will of another. And so we surrender our will and say, not as Jesus did in Gethsemane, not my will, but thine be done. I want to be most useful to you. I want to be the greatest servant. And he says that the way to do that is to move to the end of the line and not be first. We're all afflicted with the me first syndrome. And he says you need to practice being a servant of all and humbling yourself and seeking. We were riding on the airplane between London and Edinburgh, and this man, it's one of those typical things. Everyone was on the plane. We were all seated. We all got our stuff up above. We all got our stuff under our feet. We all got buckled in, and we all got settled. And one huffing, puffing person comes on. And wouldn't you know, they were by the window, and we were already seated and all packed in there. And so the man comes running up, and he goes, that's my seat. And I says, great. Do you know how to levitate like they do in India? I said, can you do that? He said, no. I said, well, I'll happily get up. And so we got up and let him in. Well, I'm glad I was nice to him. Turns out he's the Solicitor General. I think that's what they call him. He's this big Scottish attorney. And he was on loan from Scotland to Italy. They asked him to come and examine the Italian government for corruption. Can you imagine the Italians hired the Scottish people to look for corruption? Unbelievable. You know what was really neat was he was watching me. I was getting ready for speaking. I had to go as soon as we landed and speak. and he looked over and he says, "Oh, hey," he said, "the Bible," he says, "I go to church too." And I told him where I was speaking, and it turned out he knows the Lord, was a believer. He's high up in the government and a wonderful outreach evangelist to the legal community, both in Scotland and in Italy when he took his trip over there. But what was amazing was that he said, because of the circles I run in, he says, I have to practice humbling myself. And he said, what I do is, he said, I will always try and back up and let people go ahead of me in the line. So I don't think that, you get this first class syndrome. Have you ever flown first class, gotten upgraded, or someone was kind to you? You feel different. You look at those peons getting on the airplane. I mean, you're sitting and drinking your orange juice and, you just relish it. And if they stand too long in your section, you want them to move and you don't want them to use your bathroom up there. It's special. And you love being boarded before everybody. You're not like the cattle. You're first class. There's nothing wrong with first class. Seats are wider, so if you're a little overweight, there's a nice place to sit. It's just great. But you know what he said? He said, I'm always first class in everything. He wasn't on our flight. He was late. But he's always first class, and he says, I have to practice not, as a believer, getting proud. And thinking people should serve me, and thinking that people should get out of the way for me, and thinking that people should listen to me, and thinking that people should honor me. Jesus said, he said, if you desire to be first, let him be your servant. If you want to be great, be a slave. For just a minute, I want you to think about that. An author by the name of Cecil Northcutt wrote a book called Famous Life Decisions. And he talks about a Japanese saint by the name of Tohiyoko Kagawa and how he decided to live this out. And I'll just read to you about 3 paragraphs. This Kagawa said, "Oh, God, make me like Christ." And so to be like Christ, he went to live in the slums of Tokyo, even though he himself was suffering with tuberculosis. It seemed the last place on earth that a man in his condition should have gone, but he went to live in a 6x6 hut in a Tokyo slum. On the first night, he was asked to share his bed with a man suffering from contagious itch. It was a test of his faith. Would he go back to the point of no return? No. He welcomed this fellow, poor, poverty-ridden bedfellow. Then the beggar asked him for his shirt, and he gave it. The next day, he was back for Kagawa's coat and trousers, and got them too. Kagawa was left standing in a ragged old kimono. The slum dwellers of Tokyo laughed at him, but they came to respect him. He stood in the driving rain, preaching the gospel, coughing all the time. God is love, and where love is, there is God. And often he fell down exhausted, and the rough men of the slums carried him gently back to his hut. Kagawa himself wrote, God dwells among the lowliest of men. He sits in the dust heap among the prison convicts. He stands with the juvenile delinquents. He is there with the beggars. He is among the sick. God visits the prison cell before going to the temple. Before he goes to church, let him visit the hospital. Before he reads his Bible, let him help the beggar there in his greatness. And Kagawa ministered Christ by going to the lowliest and being lowly like them. Now, I don't think that we have to go to the slums if there are any around here, but what I think is we make a mental choice, as Jesus said. I honor, Matthew 20-28, I honor those who willingly put themselves to the end of the line, put themselves to the end of the head table. They don't sit at the head table. They don't think that they have to be treated first class. Jesus said, I will honor you with a well done if you will humble yourself as a slave.